Hello and welcome to Astro Talk for September 2022. I'm Ada Pembroke and today we are talking about progressions. Before I go into the astrological nuts and bolts of progressions, I'd like to tell a story. An acorn falls in the forest. Inside that acorn is the embryo of a sprout, and inside the sprout is DNA. If we could read that DNA, it would tell us everything we need to know about the tree that acorn will become, if the environment is right for the acorn to grow into a tree. Fortunately for this acorn, the environment is right. It is found by a squirrel, one of the gardeners of the forest, and it is buried in rich soil in a kindly grove. For many years, the tree lives in a tree nursery, watched over by older trees, who carefully shade it from the sun so the young tree won't be too precocious and grow faster than its trunk can support. Then tragedy strikes. A downed power line starts a forest fire, covering the tree's bark with char and killing its neighbors. Thanks to the gentle care of the tree's neighbor when it was small, the tree survives the fire, and it becomes the only tree in a wide meadow until it is middle-aged and a windstorm takes off one of its limbs. As an old tree, it appears somewhat crooked from the missing limb, but it remains strong and lives a very long time. In the DNA of that tree, you would see nothing about forest fires or windstorms. All you would see is a plan that assumes that everything would go perfectly, a plan that doesn't take into account the sacrifices and adjustments every living thing makes in response to stressors and opportunities. In short, you would see the tree's potential, stripped of the influence of its environment. In order to get a somewhat complete picture of the life of the tree, you need to be able to see three things. First, you need the tree's inner blueprint, its internal logic, its inherent design, the attributes of the organism that determine its identity. Second, you need the path of the tree's growth. You need to be able to see not just the sprout, but the tree it will become. Third, you need to be able to see the events that will influence the growth of the tree. The storm that made that limb fall, the fire that gave the tree the space to grow to its full size. In astrology, we have three techniques that we use to give us this somewhat complete picture. The birth chart lays out the design of the soul. The birth chart of our tree would tell us that the seed in front of us is meant to be an oak tree. It would tell us that the oak tree would only grow strong if it was capable of learning the lessons of courage and patience. Progressions are the growth plan. They tell us how the tree will grow. Progressions would tell us that in midlife, something would happen that would make the tree need to learn new lessons that came from solitude. In old age, the tree would need to learn flexibility and perseverance in the face of obstacles. Transits would tell us about events that influence the life of the tree, the forest fire, and the windstorm. These three techniques are kind of like the kids in Captain Planet. Combined, they are able to do so much more than any one of them can do on their own. When you look at a natal chart, you're looking at a single moment in time, and you are extrapolating things about a person from the arrangement of the planets at the moment of their birth. Transits and progressions are both moving techniques. The planets are constantly moving from one sign to the next, making aspects with each other as they go. The chart you study today will be different than the chart you study tomorrow. Studying transits and progressions is like looking at the sky and watching the clouds go by. Transits are interested in the clouds in the outer world. They talk about events. Progressions talk about events in the inner world, changes in personality and temperament. But the natal chart always stays the same. It is like the ground that we stand on when we watch the clouds of transits and progressions go by. Your birth chart is the root prediction for your life. Nothing can happen by transit or progression that isn't allowed by the birth chart. That is why, by the way, you should always study transits and progressions in biwheel charts when you are reading transits and progressions for an individual. Without being firmly grounded in the natal chart and how the transits and progressions are influencing the natal chart, you're not really seeing the meaning of transits and progressions. But we'll get into this technical stuff later. For today, our focus is on progressions. Progressions are an astrological technique for predicting an individual's growth and change over a lifetime. Change is absolutely fundamental to transits and progressions. You cannot work with transits if you don't believe that trauma and good fortune are capable of changing people. And you cannot work with progressions unless you believe that people are capable of making deep changes in their personality and temperament. I'm a person who's changed a lot in my life. I have Mercury and Aries in my natal chart. When I was a kid, I was constantly getting in trouble for running my mouth. When Mercury progressed into Taurus, I started to learn to appreciate silence. I learned that I don't have to have a response for everything. I learned to pause and think before I opened my mouth, unlike the bird outside my window. Integrating these lessons meant that I was able to go slow and read deeply when my progressed Mercury went into Gemini. I wasn't always going with the first thing I read and impatiently drawing conclusions from it the way I might have if my progressed Mercury went directly from Aries to Gemini, skipping Taurus. There's an internal logic to progressions. Progressed planets always move forward through the zodiac: Aries, Taurus, Gemini, Cancer. As a planet progresses from one side to the next, it has the opportunity to adopt qualities that counterbalance the excesses of the sign it came from and prepare it for the lessons of the following sign. Aries' impulsiveness is balanced by Taurus' slow cautiousness. Taurus' caution is balanced again by Gemini's ability to seize opportunities and its curiosity. Sometimes your natural growth path involves a planet going retrograde, so you can retrace your steps and learn lessons that you missed the first time. Planets that are retrograde when you're born can also go direct. If you live a decently long life, you are guaranteed to experience progressed Mercury, stationing either retrograde or direct. But it isn't guaranteed that you will learn the lessons that you are being invited to learn by progressions. Progressions promise that we will have the opportunity to learn certain lessons, but accidents of life can prevent us from manifesting that promise. The first obstacle, and an obstacle that we all will face, is death. You can use progressions to predict what you will learn when you are 1006 years old, but it's unlikely that you will live that long. The progressed sun will likely only touch 3 signs in your lifetime. The differences in our experiences that come from the fact that we only get to experience a small sliver of the zodiac by progressions are one of the things that make us unique. The second obstacle is life circumstance. If your Mars progresses into Sagittarius, having experiences of different cultures is good for you. But what if you were born in 1820 in rural Maine and never get to travel more than 50 miles from home? The lessons you might have learned on a ship to Singapore will never be learned, through no fault of your own. The third obstacle is projection. We all have signs and planets that we have a difficult time identifying with. When we fail to recognize those energies in ourselves, we convince ourselves that they only belong to other people. When a progressed planet goes into a sign with energy that you can't own, you might have obstacles to learning how to embody that energy. And those obstacles would take the form of encounters with other people who embody that energy so that you have the opportunity to look in the mirror. But if you don't identify those experiences for what they are, you're likely to miss the opportunity to learn how to identify with those energies in yourself. And you'll go through life thinking that Saturn is only other people, for example. Fourth is astrogeography. If you spend your entire life living on your Saturn line, you'll have many opportunities to develop that Saturn. But it may be more difficult for you to learn the flexibility of mind that progressed Mercury expects of you. The last obstacle is personality. This is kind of the opposite of projection. You might really identify with an area of your natal chart and resist the change that progressions ask of you. You see this a lot with sun signs. Someone will be so proud to be a Libra, and then they identify with that sign so much that when they find out that their progressed sun went into Scorpio when they were 5 years old, they experience it as an existential trauma, as if adding that Scorpio to their chart makes them less of who they are, instead of more complicated. Most of the obstacles that I mentioned are just an artifact of life. There's no point in beating yourself up for being mortal, is there? But some of these obstacles come from fear. There's safety in staying small, to summing yourself up neatly in a single sign, to never leaving home when you have the chance to explore, to refusing to admit that a planet is part of you, to learning the easy lessons and avoiding the hard ones. You are capable of so much complexity and joy, but it requires a willingness to change. Working with progressions requires self-awareness and discernment. You have to be able to recognize the real limits of your ability and personality and privilege, and when you're not actually running into limits and you're just giving into stubbornness and fear. This is really difficult work. We all make mistakes. And the mistakes that we make that keep us stubborn are one of the things that, well, make us different.